Again, Erev Shabbos, everybody. Welcome to Jerry's Corona Contemplations. We will tonight be discussing not first and foremost, but foremost Tisha B'Av. It is right after Tisha B'Av here in Eretz Yisrael. I've had my coffee and I'm all revved up and ready to go. As you could probably hear, I'm like having a real caffeine speed fix here. But we have to start. Before we can even get to Tisha B'Av, we have to talk about Parashat Devarim. Because Parashat Devarim is inevitably read on Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbat preceding Tisha B'Av. And why is that? Because Parashat Devarim is Moshe's parting words to Am Yisrael. So imagine the scene. We are on the banks of the Jordan River after a 40-year spin around in the desert. All sorts of things have happened over the 40 years, and these are now the She'eret HaPleita. These are the children of the people that came out of Egypt, with two exceptions, three exceptions, Moshe, Yoshua, and Kalev. And everyone else died off in the desert because of the sin of the spies, which we'll talk about shortly. And Moshe is giving them his parting words, and what does he start off with? Gives them like the Musar Shmuz to end all Musar Shmuzin. He tells them, you complained here and you complained there and you didn't believe in this and all sorts of things they did wrong. And I think it's pretty clear that the point that he's making and that Hashem is making and that the Torah makes from the beginning, right from Adam Arishon all the way through to Devarim, is when Hashem does not like when people kvetch. I mean, I don't like people playing God or people playing God's analyst, but this one seems pretty clear. Hashem does not like when we don't exhibit, wait for it, here it comes, the attitude of gratitude. And Moshe is now speaking again to the children of those that came out of Egypt, and listen, you saw miracles that no one's ever seen. And no one may ever see. Probably won't. The splitting of the Red Sea and the plagues in Egypt, even though a lot of them weren't even born at the time, right? But how do you not appreciate what Hashem has done for you? And this is the theme that runs through Sefer Devarim. Also, let's go to the next slide. What is the sin that caused the 40-year sojourn in the desert? The Chet HaMeraglim. And as you see here, the Bnei Yisrael were fully forgiven for the sin of the golden calf, right? And if you read the Parsha and Tisha, you could see that Hashem ultimately agrees to travel with them in the camp, and meaning the Aron and so on and so forth. But for the sin of the spies, as you know if you're fasting today, we still haven't been forgiven. Why? Because we haven't done a full tshuva for the sin of the spies, right? The Chet HaMeraglim is in Parashat Devarim, Moshe goes into details that you wanted to go up, and I told you it wasn't a good idea, and you did it anyway, and you spurned the good land, the land that Hashem is giving you. You said, no, it's too hard, the government isn't frum enough, and I don't want my kids going into the army, and the parnasa, and this, that, and the other thing, and I don't like Israelis, and all these things. You didn't get it. You're still doing it to this day, and this is why. In Parashat Devarim, right before, right at the end of the first Aliyah and right at the end of the second Aliyah, Hashem says through Moshe, "Re'ei natati lachem et haaretz, ba'u u'reshu et haaretz." And right before Shlishi, he says, "Alei reish, go and inherit it." So, you know the story about the guy in the flood, Katrina, right? I think I've told you this before, but I'm going to go over it again. It's Katrina. The flood waters are rising. The person is in his house. He goes up to the second floor. The flood waters are rising. A boat comes out the window and they say, get in. We'll save you. And he's like, no, I'm waiting for God to save me. Fine. The boat takes off. He finally is up on the roof. A helicopter comes, drops down a ladder and says, we're going to save you. Climb up the ladder. No, I'm waiting for God to save me. What happens? He drowns. Surprise, surprise. Gets up to heaven, pearly gates, you know, the whole scene. God, I believed in you. Why didn't you save me? I sent you the boat. I sent you the helicopter. You didn't get in. What do you want from me? Hashem's telling us today. We're sitting here crying in front of the kotel, and Hashem says, wait, I sent you 48. I sent you 67. Every other miracle that's been done. Alei Reish. You have to go take it. You want Eretz Yisrael, you have to go and take it. You want the Beit HaMikdash, you have to build the Beit HaMikdash. It's not going to happen by itself. And I mentioned this in my I'm going over things I said in my last year. But this is so very important. Tisha B'Av. Here we are. People are sitting in front of the kotel crying. Why are we crying? We have to... The temple burned. Why? Well, why really did the temple burn? Well, so we know there are a number of reasons given. First of all, we say it's because of sinat chinam. People didn't behave well to one another. Okay, that's a very important message. But more important, people did not go back to Eretz Yisrael with Ezra and Nehemiah. That's the real reason that the temple burnt, the second temple anyway. As a matter of fact, had we, when I say we, I mean Am Yisrael as a whole. I wasn't born back then, but had the people gone with Ezra and Nehemiah en masse to rebuild the second temple, it never would have been destroyed. So we know in commentaries it says the second Parsha, the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of sinat chinam. True, but I'm sure there's a lot of psychological engineering that went into that, because when you're living in Bavel and you're one of the people that didn't go back, it's kind of hard to say, well, But that's really what happened. But again, the Torah tells us, Re'ei natati lachem et haaretz, ba'u reshu et haaretz. And the Torah says, Re'ei natan Hashem Elokecha lefanecha et haaretz alei reish. Alei reish means what? Inherit, right? Yerusha. Asher diber Hashem Elokei avotecha lach, al tira v'al techat. That's what it says in Parashat Devarim. Don't be afraid. You have to go and rebuild. We want the Beit HaMikdash. We have to rebuild. Every Rishon says that we have to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash. Yes, there is the obscure reference in one place in Shas that talks about, or I don't even know if it's in Shas. I think it's a Medrash. Don't quote me, but that Hashem's going to build the Beit HaMikdash out of fire and it'll appear. That is allegory. Every Rishon, Rambam, Rashi, Kleyakar, I can go through them all talk about the mitzvah to build the Beit HaMikdash is on us. We see it in Parsha Truma Tetzaveh. It is a mitzvah taseh for us to do it. So, Baruch Hashem, today, there was such aliyah to Har HaBayit. I mean, Rav Kreuzer went so far as to say it's a bigger mitzvah on Tisha B'Av to go to Har HaBayit than it is to fast. He didn't say not to fast, but he said if a person is going to Har HaBayit and it was extremely hot, right? You could take water, best to do it with shiurim, whatever, but if you don't feel well, drink. Because that's how big a mitzvah it is to be makayim the mitzvah of Viet Mikdashi Tiro, especially on Tisha B'Av. How are we going to show Hashem that we want to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash? By going to Har HaBayit and telling Hashem, here we are. We're not waiting. We are ready to act right now. And this is what has to be done. The destruction of the Beit HaMikdash was the biggest chilul Hashem in history. I would say the Holocaust is a very close second. Maybe they're tied for first. But go to the fact that there is no Jewish presence, and I mean in terms of a building on Har HaBayit, is an extension of the Chilul Hashem and an extension of the Chet HaMeraglim. In order to be Makaya, to be Matakein, Latakein Olam, B'malchut Shaddai. Everyone talks about Tikkun Olam, right? The way to get rid of Tikkun Olam is to the way to get rid of the way to be Makayim Tikkun Olam is Latakein Olam. Finish the sentence. B'malchut Shaddai, with the kingdom of Hashem, and the only way that's ever going to happen is if we go up and rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, and it is up to us to do it. Let's look for a second at this week's Parsha. And I said that the Parashat Devarim and Parashat V'yatchanan, it's all of Sefer Devarim is one continuing speech by Moshe Rabbeinu, but you have to look at Devarim through the lens of V'yatchanan, and V'yatchanan through the lens of Devarim, because what does Moshe immediately do? V'yatchanan el Hashem ba'etahi le'mor, Hashem Elokim atah hachilota larot et avdecha et gadlacha et yadcha chazaka Asher miel b'shamayim uvaretz asher yaseh k'masecha v'chig gvuratecha Ebrana v'yareh et ha'aretz hatova asher be'eva ha'yarden. With his last breath, what does Moshe Rabbeinu beg Hashem for? Beg to go into the land. What does Hashem answer him? Ravlach. For anybody else, yes, but for you, you're coming straight home. I have for you a greater gift. But that was one and done. Only because Moshe was the most perfect tzaddik that ever lived, Hashem had to punish him with the one thing that he wanted more than everything else. But we have the opportunity to be Makayim, the mitzvah that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to do with his dying breath. How do we say no? How? The entire Parsha of V'yatchanan is V'haya ki yaviacha, V'haya ki yaviacha. And Moshe Rabbeinu goes over the Aseret HaDibrot. L'man yarichon yamecha al ha'adama. What's he talking about? He's talking about Eretz Yisrael. Everywhere in the Parsha, throughout the entire thing, you say la'asot kain ba'aretz, 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 ba'aretz. Everywhere. And that teaches us that the only way to really be Makayim, the mitzvahs of the Torah, is in Eretz Yisrael. Rishonim go so far as to say that doing mitzvot in Chutz La'aretz is practice. You don't really get the whole mitzvah. So a person could be the biggest Shomer Shabbos his entire life in Chutz La'aretz, and that doesn't add up to one Shabbos in Eretz Yisrael. So today, if you're sitting in Chutz La'aretz watching this, think to yourself for 1 second, what Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't have given for the opportunity to set foot in Eretz Yisrael. And I just want to finish with a story about my wife's family, about Ruchi's family. Her grandfather, her paternal grandfather, they lived in Tomaszów in Poland, and he gave his entire fortune twice to be able to get visas to go to Eretz Yisrael before the Holocaust. Both times he was cheated, and he didn't get them. He died ultimately in Russia. They were fleeing from the Nazis, and he died in somewhere in Russia, Ukraine. It was Ukraine, I believe. Kazakhstan, that was in Kazakhstan, actually. But he didn't make it. So Ruchi, on my father-in-law's deathbed, my father-in-law, Rav Menachem Bereb Yehuda, Zechreinu Levracha, she promised him that anything he left to us would be invested in Eretz Yisrael. She was on a plane 2 weeks after she finished sitting Shiva. He understood what Moshe Rabbeinu understood, that without Eretz Yisrael, it's all meaningless. And he gave his entire life so that he could, although he never made it, Baruch Hashem, my father-in-law Zatzal, not only made it to Eretz Yisrael, but he became a Sgan Aluf in Sahal, a lieutenant colonel. We should all be Zaycha. Baruch Hashem, I'm sitting here after Tisha B'Av in Eretz Yisrael. We should all be Zaycha to come to Eretz Yisrael and once and for all to end the Galut, both in a physical and in a spiritual sense. Shabbos Makar HaBracha, Rabbi say, Es Shabsosai Tishmaru Umikdashi Tira'u. As important as the Beit HaMikdash is, and rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash, the most important thing is Shabbos. That is our sign that we are part of Am Yisrael. Don't forget it. May this be the last Tisha B'Av where we fast. May next year be a Tisha B'Av of singing and dancing in the courtyards on Har HaBayis as we're watching the Beit HaMikdash be rebuilt, because even if we started tomorrow, a building that size is going to take a little bit longer than a year. So we'll be dancing in the courtyard while we're watching the people rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash. I'm a Levi. I want to get my fingernails filthy with the dirt of Har HaBayit working on the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. Nothing would give me greater pleasure. We should all be there and singing and dancing on Har HaBayit. The Shabbos Nachamu should be the beginning of the end of the spiritual Galut as we begin the rebuilding of Har HaBayit. Baruch Hashem, we're here. May we all be here, and may this be an absolutely wonderful Shabbat Nachamu. May it taka be a condolence to all of us as we begin, like I said, the rebuilding of Bayit Shlishi. Join us back here next week, Be'ezrat Hashem. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful and meaningful Shabbat.